This is the scariest part of the presentation, where I make sure the monitor connects, even though I just did it before. Actually, this is going to be the second scariest thing that happened today. The first scary thing that happened was, you'll learn this about me, I'm very forgetful. I wrote in the book that the reason I write apps is to remember the things I'm supposed to do. So I forgot my business cards, and my business cards are in storage in Mira Mesa. So like an hour before this, I had to drive up there, and I was just terrified, because getting from Qualcomm, they're right next to Qualcomm too. So getting from Qualcomm to here, that was the most terrifying thing in my life. And then when I got there, the best part was, I didn't have my current business cards. I had my business cards from 4 years ago. So the phone number is still the same, and I'm here on time, so I think I mostly won. Yes, thank you. No, the real victory will be what you learn from this talk, though, so let's hold the applause. So, Ahmed Bakir, the talk is Beginning iOS Media App Development. It's the same title as my book, coincidentally. So, when I wrote this book, or when they gave me the title, I was like, I'm never going to be able to give another presentation again that's not on iOS media app development. So the last one I did when I had freedom was like responsive design. I was like, I don't even, but I want to have something that's free. So, all right, let me give you the agenda. First, I'm going to tell you about me. I'm going to tell you how to get started in media app development. Who here is an app developer? Who here is like, who would say they're a beginner? Who says they're a beginner? Who says they're like intermediate? Okay, cool. Who's done a media app? Okay, good stuff. AVKit or Media Player Framework?
AVKit.
Both?
Yeah, a little bit of Media Player.
Yeah.
Playing the media.
So the good thing about this talk, and it's kind of like how I wrote the book, is it's kind of a beginner intermediate thing. If you already know how to program, if you already know a for loop, if you already know iOS development. The good news is you're not going to read that in this book again. And the same thing for the talk. I'm going to assume that you've done some programming, but I'm going to assume that you don't really know that much about multimedia. Or you might know everything and prove me wrong. So I'll tell you about how to get started, though. That's the easy beginner slide, like what kind of computer do you need, blah, blah, blah. Then I'm going to cover the iOS media stack, which is how iOS represents media, how it plays back media. From there, we're going to go practical, and I'm going to teach you how to use AVKit to add a video player to your app. This presentation has code. It has theoretical stuff. The code is in Swift, because Swift is like the most popular thing ever right now. Ray's looking at me. He knows it's true. It is true. When I wrote the book and they announced Swift, I'd already written half of it. And my publisher is like, will you rewrite it? And I'm like, no. But when I do a second edition, hopefully it'll be in Swift. That'll be for sure. So good stuff. Then at the end, I'm going to save time for Q&A. Since this is a media app book talk, it's about media apps, writing apps, technical writing. I'm not going to do like how much do you get paid, how long does it take to make an app. So we're going to stay on focus. Cool. Good stuff. So about me, Ahmed Bakir. Who's been to one of my talks before or knows me or has worked with me. I've worked with quite a few of you, and it's amazing. You still come back to see me. That feels so good. So I'm the founder of DevAtelier. Basically, we make apps for other companies. It's me and a lot of people I've worked with. We're freelancers, but we come together to make apps. I've been working on apps since 2009. I was, in 2009 and prior, I was working on the other iOS. I was doing firmware for Cisco iOS. And when they changed the name, I was horrified. I was like, I'm trying to get away from this past. Why do they keep pulling me back in? But I was working on apps, or sorry, Cisco router firmware, like keyboard drivers and the command line interface. And then I saw iOS, and I'm like, well, this is kind of hard, and the syntax is weird, but it's better than writing a keyboard driver. So I made apps for fun. I was like, one of my friends ran a coffee shop. I would just sit in there and make apps, and then people found out I made apps. Then they started paying me. So that's me. 6 years later, here I am. I've done a lot of stuff. I'm a consultant primarily. So people come in and I architect their app or I fix their app. And I've worked on apps for Citrix, Divx, Target Stores, Abercrombie. A lot of fun stuff. So that's me. But I should probably talk about the book too. So last year I wrote a book. not many of you saw me last year because I was very secretive and stressed out writing a book. But this book is what we're going to talk about. 400 pages, it's photos, videos, audio. What makes this book different is it's not just 10 pages on how do you do a video player. It starts at how do you use Apple's built-in thing, and then how do you make it yourself. So you're like, well, this is a cool video player, but mine needs to be blue. Or like Steven knows, Steven works with me. And he knows like everything has to be blue. How do I change it? How do I add my own graphics? Or how do I make my own video or audio recorder? Stuff like that. So it's a fun book. It's available everywhere. I'm going to raffle off a copy to people who stay to the end. And I'm also going to have, I'm going to be signing copies at the end if you don't have one. And I sell it cheaper than Amazon. So that's the last pitch before I pitch knowledge to you. So let me pitch knowledge. Okay, so I'm assuming everyone has this or wants to get this. But to do media apps or any iOS app in general, what I recommend is have a recent computer and have a recent iPhone. So who submitted an app to the App Store? You guys are amazing. So as you know, Apple has very strict requirements on what you can use to build your app because they check what the binary is compiled against. They check, are you compiling it on an Intel Mac? Are you compiling it on OS X 10.9? Are you using iOS 8 or whatever? The general rule is have a recent Mac that can run a recent version of OS X, so Mavericks or Yosemite. I'm supporting a project right now that's using both. Don't feel like you have to upgrade to Yosemite just because it's new. Sometimes it's good to stay a step behind them on the OS X version because Yosemite is extremely buggy, much like iOS 8. Who else has noticed that? It's so buggy. Miranda knows that because she was sitting next to me when I was fixing really bad bugs that shouldn't have existed and cursing a lot. I'm sorry. So have a recent OS X. You should have the most recent Xcode and iOS 8. The reason I say most recent is because whereas they're lax on Yosemite versus Mavericks, they're not lax on the most recent system version because they fix a lot of stuff under the covers. And if you don't compile against that, they just won't accept it. So my tip, get the latest Xcode on App Store and make sure it's always updated. For media apps, you'll need a physical device. I recommend an iPhone or an iPad, not the iPod Touch because they're kind of killing that hardware. But what you'll see when you're doing media apps especially is some of the APIs you go into, like the audio session, which is how you can determine if your video app plays songs or whatever, plays audio when this volume switch is muted. The stuff like that you can't actually test on the simulator, or it won't work the same way on the simulator. Or you'll find out there's a memory issue that only the 4S has, but not the 6. Or that the 6 Plus doesn't follow the rules that they set, which is another true story. So get a physical device, and along with that, get an Apple Developer Program membership. You can download Xcode for free, but to actually test on hardware, you need to pay them the $99. It's kind of cool because they give you two free tech support incidents. So if you were going to bug that's really nasty, you can call them twice in 1 year and get like priority help instead of just going to the hopeless forums where everything dies, mostly your dreams and your hopes of a promotion from your boss. But you get that, you get to use hardware, you get to use iTunes Connect so you can submit to the App Store. It also lets you use the new Test Flight. Who's played with that? It's really cool and annoying. The new Test Flight, they bought Test Flight app. The new version lets you use 1,000 beta testers and stuff. And it's all managed through Xcode or through iTunes Connect, so you can just hit a switch and your test version becomes the production version. It gets you all that, and you can enter the $2,000 WWDC lottery that you're probably not going to get into. Except for Julian. Julian got in. Yeah. I got in once. And I got a jacket that was too big. And I can't wear it. But I'm not giving it to my dad because it's a cool jacket. So, okay, so let's talk about iOS again. So how does iOS represent media? So everything is frameworks. You know Cocoa Touch, right? Cocoa Touch is the smaller version of Cocoa, OS X, that lets you do iOS stuff. And it's just a collection of like Apple-provided libraries that abstract a lot of functionality for you. When you're doing media apps, you're going to work with 3 main frameworks. They're AVFoundation, Media Player, and AVKit. One of these actually represents the media. The other two are players. I'm going to go over them in a bit more detail. But whenever you're doing an app, you're just going to use one of these three. So let me show you a little bit more about it. So if you've ever even looked at the Apple documentation, you'll see everything has AV in front of it. AV asset, AV player, AV player layer, AV asset library. And that stands for AV Foundation. AV Foundation is for representing audio-visual data. But basically, it's what takes, I have a video file, to I have an object that represents a video file and all the metadata for it. It's basically how you take that video file and make it accessible in your code. In addition to like the metadata parsing and all that fun stuff, it also does all of the encoding and decoding for you. So back in the day, you know, like you would have to know how MPEG-4 worked, or you'd have to pay somebody a lot of money for an MPEG-4 decoder so that you could play it. Video files, unlike a photo, videos are like a bunch of stills, and then they compress it with an algorithm that makes it save data. Because you know, like a Blu-ray is like 50 gigs. If it was uncompressed, it would be like 500, 1,000, whatever. So like it compresses it, but you have to know how to compress it, how to like undo it, how to unzip it. Good thing is, it does that for you. It also is responsible for creating and retrieving data from your phone. So if you're using the photo library on the app, you go through AV Foundation, and that like has a relative URL that lets you get at the secret protected photo files, which are in a library iOS controls. But at the same time, you can also use it to write files. So say you're using the built-in camera controller. You know when you use the iOS camera app? You can also use that within your app. You can actually just like say, what's it called? UI. This is how much I'm mentally scarred from it, because I remember these really long names off the top of my head. UI image picker controller. You can use UI, that same thing, directly in your app, and then it'll go through AV Foundation to save the file back to your photo library or the disk or wherever. So the next one is Media Player. Media Player is the UI for asset playback. Up until this year, this was the only game in town. So you know when you use Safari or Chrome, and then it gives you like that little default gray video player, or it gives you that music player that has the QuickTime logo? That's one of Apple's libraries. When you use, this is a long one, when you use MP Movie Player Controller, then MP Movie Player Controller lets you access that gray screen, the full screen, just automatically. All you do is tell it how to configure it and what the video file should be or the stream. But it comes in two modes. Most of the things Apple gives you have one or two modes. So there's the full screen mode, but there's also headless. So if you've ever used an app like YouTube where there's just a little video player in a window, but then you can't change the controls or anything else like that, or an auto-playing introduction video, that's MP Movie Player, which is exactly like Movie Player Controller, except without the controller part, without the controls. What's cool about it is because it's the first way of doing it. It was the only way of doing it. When they put it out, it hooked in really deeply with like the photo library, the video app, and even the music player. So I'm introducing it. There's a new hotness. So we're not going to use this in the presentation, but the reason I introduce it is if you're doing a music app, it's really amazing. Because you know, who has like a car that's connected where you can see like your iPod stuff on your car? Yeah, so you can actually hook in to the, you can actually hook in through MP, whatever, through Media Library, the Media Player framework. You can actually hook into that and give it metadata that'll go to every device that does made for iPod. And you can make your apps hook into the remote control on your headset, which is also covered in the book. Not today, but it's fun. It's mostly for audio. And this is an example from the book. This is chapter 12 or 13. I teach you how to make a health workout app, so a running app that plays music. And it shows health kit info, but it also has a little headless UI. The headless UI means there's no UI provided. You make your own UI. So this is a music player where I put in my own icons to do like forward, back, next, and then also to pick music. So that's an example of what you'd use MP Media Player Controller for. But we're going to talk about the new hotness, which is AVKit. AVKit is almost exactly the same as I want to call it MP-Kit, but it's Media Player. It's almost the exact same thing, except it's new. And as the name implies, it ties in really deeply with AVFoundation. Before, you'd have to basically you'd have to inherit AVFoundation to get at the data, and then you'd have to create MP Movie Player Controller to actually view it. With this, you use like 90% AVFoundation classes, and then you hook in the other 10% is just from AVKit. So it does the same thing, asset playback, both audio and video. By default, iOS lets you play MPEG-4, H.264, MP4, AAC, which is like Dolby stereo audio. And it lets you do like, it doesn't do all the container formats, but it does like, what is it? M4V. So it lets you do a lot of that stuff for free without decoding it yourself, regardless of what you use. But UI for asset playback, it's newer. It has the whole iOS 7, iOS style. What's cool about this one, though, is you can embed it. It works with storyboards. So this is one of the sample apps from the book. I think it's chapter 12. I don't know why I remember that. Probably because it was an amazing, horrible experience. That was also amazing. But you can put it in a container, which I'll show you, and then it'll automatically adapt the controls for the container. You don't have to do this yourself. With MP Player Controller, you'd actually have to instantiate a different, like one of the ways you'd have to do this is you'd instantiate 2 objects to represent the player in 2 states. With this, it's just one object that changes. So I like to use it for video applications. It does so much for you. And the best part is it works with storyboards. So who loves Interface Builder? Who has a mixed relationship with Interface Builder? So the cool thing is you can actually, now you can take, there's a component called AVKit player controller, and you can actually just drop it in, and you can actually have, that guy just dropped in there. You don't have to do anything by yourself, anything at all. Just drop it in, it works. MP Player Controller does not do that. So that's why it's cool. It also works pretty well with constraints, because if you're using a correctly initialized object, it'll actually follow the constraints and rotation for you. You don't have to do that yourself, which was previously a cause of much strife and stress. Oh, what happened? I need power. Okay, well, I don't need power. So much for that 10-hour laptop, right? Who's actually gotten 10 hours off a MacBook? No one. The Apple Demo Lab, one time. The one time marketing walked into the room. So, okay, so I gave you a lot of words and a lot of frameworks. Why? Because Apple uses MVC for everything, including media. Who knows MVC? Who loves MVC? Who's kind of, Yeah. So MVC is, if you've never used it, it's a design pattern that tells you kind of how you should separate your code, especially when it comes to UI. Like try to put all the model stuff, the data, try to put in the model. Because like, a user shouldn't care what the metadata is exactly or how the codec works. Put it there, hide it from them. Represent the data in the view. Like that's where you say, okay, make a video player that's centered, and then put a scrubber at the bottom. And then use the controller to kind of be the glue code to say, what should happen when I press this button? So they made the frameworks kind of tie into that for you. And so how does it work in action? So usually for the model, you're using AVFoundation. And one of the classes it provides is AVPlayerItem. AVPlayerItem does exactly what I said. Kind of. It takes your file and then it makes it something you can access in your code. So you can initialize an AVPlayerItem with a file URL, a streaming URL, or even with like another player object. Don't worry about that too much, but the main thing is it takes your files or your data and it makes it a video file that something else can play. Your view, the visual layout stuff, that's taken care of by AVPlayerLayer. You know how I said 90%? Like there's a player that comes from AVKit, but it's 90%, it shares stuff. The thing that AV Player and AVPlayerLayer are what actually draw the video onto the screen for you. By themselves, they're just like a UI view with video on it. That's it. There's no controls, there's no nothing. AVFoundation gives you that. The reason I say both is because it depends on how deep you want to go. Like This is a UI view. A UI view is there. It's painted for you. But then if you want to change how the UI view does like the deep drawing, like if you want to add a color filter or something, use PlayerLayer. And it actually kind of goes like this. You set up an AV player with a player item, and then inside your AV player, inside of your player view controller is an AV player. And so the controller part is AV player view controller. How much time do you think it took me to format all the text and the inlines in this book? Longer than to write the book. Because I had a formatting guy, but he wouldn't format it until I'd done my proper formatting. That's publishing. So yeah, it's the controller. This is what gives you the controls. This is what gives you the buttons. And then, because we have to know both, if you're doing media player, you represent the data with AV asset or MP player item. These come from AVFoundation or media player. That's kind of why I was like, you have to include both, because you have to include both to make the model work. And then the view is called, despite the name, it's called MP movie player controller. That's the same thing as AV player, where it just draws the video on the screen and it'll do windowed playback. But the controller, the real controller, is MP movie player view controller, which also comes from the media player framework, and that's what gives you the controls, the gray bars. Do you know how I practiced to say this? Tongue twisters. I practiced tongue twisters for like 2 hours. Sorry. I had the day off, so I used it productively. I worked on a keynote presentation and tongue twisters. That's why I became an adult. So, all right, there we go. This is MVC. So, all right, now let's actually get to what you wanted to hear. How do I use it? So I'm going to show you the simple case. So the book's kind of written like this too. I tell you how to start the project, then I give you concepts as they come along. Because I don't assume, like, most people don't learn what like a key value observer is or delegation until you need to do it. So I actually just insert it in there. If I say, this class needs a key value observer, I'll tell you what. We're not at that point yet. So we're going to start from the beginning. So for this app, I'm basically making, I'll skip to the end and show you, we'll cheat, spoilers. What we're going to make is we're going to make an app that has a little video player in the middle that also does full screen expansion. So it's just a one screen app. Who's been playing with AutoLayout, auto sizing? It's the most beautiful, horrible thing ever. It's really cool because when it works, you can just set parameters to make your UI change. So you kind of stop going from developing two versions of an app to one app that changes. But it's such a pain in the butt to debug. But we're going to take advantage of that. The book also has samples that have constraints set for you. If you remember using AutoLayout last year, the key was you set constraints. Think of a rubber band with something stuck in the middle. You say, that little thing that's on the rubber band, what should happen when the rubber band stretches? Should it get smaller? Should it get bigger? Should it stay the same size? You set those. They're called constraints, and it adapts to everything. iOS 8, auto sizing, added even more. So now, now it's like, what should happen on the 6 Plus? Or what should happen on a watch with this same UI? Learn it. It's annoying. But the book has samples that'll help you with it. Because I put in projects with valid constraints. So I skipped ahead too far. Way too far. OK, so we're going to start out. We're just going to make a single view app. It'll be universal. It doesn't matter. We're going to use AutoLayout, so it'll work on both. AVKit is a library it's a framework that comes with iOS 8. So you need the iOS 8 SDK. It won't compile on 7, but it runs on 7. So if you're trying to deploy it, set your base target, your best SDK, what it compiles against, to 8, and your target SDK, what it runs on, to 7, and you'll be good. The most recent app I was working on, we used AVKit. Worked fine on iOS 7, 4S. However, the iPhone 6 Plus did not work because they don't follow their own rules for AutoLayout. Who else has seen that? Quiet audience, yeah. You'll see it soon enough. I lost my phone for a while, and the thing that terrified me the most, I have a 6, was I was like, I'm going to have to buy a 6 Plus to replace this. And I really don't want that phone, but I need it for work. But I really don't want that phone. Heads up. So OK, we set up our project. It's a simple project, iOS 8, Objective-C or Swift. This app is going to be in Swift. It's the new hotness. So we set up the project. But what we're going to do next is add frameworks. By the way, don't worry about following this too closely, because I'm going to demonstrate it right after too. But we add frameworks to the project. So who's added an external framework to their project before? Yeah, good. It's a way of life. What's cool is in Xcode 6, you can add them right from the project settings screen. So when you click on your project name, at the very, I'll just cheat. At the very bottom, under target and storyboard, there's linked frameworks and libraries. And so click on that plus button, and then a pop-up will come up that'll show you every Apple framework that's available to you in Cocoa Touch, and anything else you might have included through a third-party library. So we just need AVKit and AVFoundation to represent the data and the player. So let's add those. When it's done, they're in the bottom of your box. You don't have to worry about anything. It'll compile. And it works on Swift and Objective-C. So we're good. Cool, we have frameworks. We don't need to do anything else for this project, because this is just a simple player. The point of this talk and the point of the book is to show you video is scary, because a lot's going on. But it doesn't have to be. Once you understand the concepts, you can put it together easily. When you start hooking in the weird stuff like autoplay and a playlist, that's when you get confused. But if you know the basics, you're OK. So, OK. White on white. Why did Apple choose that? So next, we're going to take advantage of the storyboard feature of AVKit. So we're going to make a AV player that sits inside of a little container on our home screen. So you start out, you get the stupid little white thing, right? And then you're going to look in the object library for container view. Who's used a container view before? OK. Who wants to use one? A container view is really cool because it said the name is view, but you can actually put a complete view controller in it. So for us, it's really convenient because you know how I was saying AV player is just the video, but player controller has the controls built in? When you use a container view, you can do that. You can get all the controls, all the glue code. You don't have to rewrite the players every time. So it's really cool. So the way you use it, get it from the library, and then drag it onto your project. So when you drag it, you'll get a little gray box, and then it'll be connected to another gray box. Who's played with segways before? Not the thing that the guy driving off the cliff. Yeah. So a segue is an easy way of doing a transition, like from a button to a view controller, or putting a view controller in another view controller. That's the magic of how container views work. There's a segue that's called embed, and when embed is called, that's when you can do events on the controller. Or if you have an external button and you're trying to change what's in the controller, if you want to make an Android tab bar because you think Android's better, like one of my developers. He switches depending on how interesting the project is, and you just want to change something that's in something else without rewriting all your classes, you can use a container for that. You can call external events on the destination of a segue. So we're going to add a container view. By default, it has a segue that's connected to an empty view controller. Yes?
Another cool thing about container views, you could get more than one UI collection view working on the same screen.
Yes, you can. I've done that. Isn't it fun?
I wasn't able to get it working any other way.
I wish I had so many struggles because I was fixing a container view that was inherently broken because it wasn't using any of they were targeting iOS 8 and Swift, but they weren't using any of the design patterns. So there was a lot of cursing. I'm sorry, Miranda. Miranda sat right next to me on this project. Okay, so related to that, speaking of trashing code, we're going to trash that view controller. So the way it starts out, we have to replace it like Indiana Jones, right? So go to your object library and search for AVKit. That's what's so cool about it. You just search for it. You don't configure it. You just download Xcode 6 and it's there, as long as you're running iOS 8. Have you noticed that? So when you have your base SDK is 8, it'll actually do different features than when your base SDK is 7 sometimes. But it doesn't work both ways, because sometimes you'll write code with 8 SDK, then you run it on a 7 device and it crashes because it can't find it. But this is here and it's there and it works because I've used it in several projects before. So you find the AVKit. It's a player view controller. It's a view controller. So it'll show up as its own full screen square thing. Just drag it on there, put it to the side. Then kill the other guy. Just delete him, click on this guy, and click on the segue to delete them. You don't need them. Then make a new one. So you know when you do a segue from a button, who's done it before? Who wants to learn? It's fun. So there's a really easy way to make a button work in iOS 8 and iOS 8. Actually, since 6, since they started doing segues, spelled segue. You just take that element that you're going from and you drag to the target. So I have a play button that should show a second screen, right? So you lay out your 2 view controllers, then you control drag on the button, and then when you stop on your destination, it'll give you a menu saying what segue do you want. So for this, we do the same thing. Start clicking from the container and then drop onto here. When the menu comes up, say embed. Cool, right? A lot to keep track of. So, all right, we need to make it work. Who's played with storyboard IDs? Right?
For multiple storyboards?
Yeah, or even an item inside of a storyboard. So these are really cool things you can tell people at parties, and then they'll all run away from you. The story of my life. No. So part of how it works is there's an easy way. If you lay out, like you can lay out stuff on a storyboard, it doesn't have to be connected. Part of the why they created it is so that you can connect stuff. So it works like a storyboard for a movie or a storyboard your UX designer gives you. But you don't have to do that. If you just name stuff by its storyboard ID or its segue ID, then you can access it from your code. So for us, we want to figure out when this event fires, when the load happens. So we're going to name our segue. We're going to name it a init player. And the way you do that, you just, clicker. Click. Maybe I didn't put it in there. Oh well. You click on this guy, and then in the Properties tab, when you click on it, I'll show you. It'll have a little text field where you enter the ID. So just name it this, a init player, and be very specific. I don't know about you guys. When I started iOS, the thing that killed me was Interface Builder. Because Interface Builder will just crash, but it won't tell you why it crashed. And it'll crash because you forgot an uppercase letter, or you forgot to connect something. And of course, the error message does not say, you forgot an uppercase letter, you idiot. It says, crashed because pointer was invalid. And you're like, right? Mind explosion. So be very careful. Name your segue ID. Then stuff will work. Cool. All right, so we're new code. Who's played with Swift yet? What are your opinions?
I like it. Yeah.
You like it? Who's used Swift in production?
JSON support sucks.
What do you think?
I like it.
Do you? I have mixed opinions. When it works, it's really cool. But this talks in Swift, because Swift is easy to read. Easier than Objective-C. So let's get started. So like with anything else in your class, when you're sharing something inside of a class, when multiple things need to access it inside the class, you add it as a property. So we're going to make an AV. So going back to this, right? Somehow we have to make this guy control this guy. And we need to know in the code, how do I get to that? So we're going to make a property for it. So in Swift, to make a property for your class, you just add it to the very top underneath the definition. We're going to subclass AVPlayerViewController because AVPlayerView is the controller, right? That's what we need. These keywords. So var let's like a constant never changes. Var is something you need to change properties on. It's a var. The exclamation mark and the question mark.
It's exciting.
Yeah, right? I'm so not excited about it. But it's required, right? So you need that. One of the things Swift does That's, well, is it optional? It's an optional, right? It's an optional, yeah. I'm pointing, it's an optional. An optional in Swift, one of the things that makes Swift different from Objective-C is Objective-C, everything's objects, everything's pointers. In Swift, who's done like Perl or Python, right? Everything's kind of a string, kind of a variable, right? But in Objective-C, they're called, or Swift, they're called optionals. An optional can be a value, or it can be not a value. Not exactly nil. When you're working with UI stuff, especially like something that comes from a package, like your bundle for the app, or something that comes from a storyboard, to be safe, make it an optional. A lot of the system types will define it as an optional, so put it in there. Put in the exclamation mark. Tell Swift you're excited to see it somehow. And then, okay, so we included these classes in our project, AVKit and AVFoundation. But this code isn't going to compile. It's going to crash because it doesn't know what AVPlayer view controller is. So in your view controller or in your header file somewhere, make sure you import AVKit and AVFoundation. Then all the symbols will work. So, all right, we've created an AVPlayer view controller for our class. What do we want to do now? We kind of want to give it stuff, right? We want to make the storyboard link up to our code. So how do we do that? We need to get at the segue. You get the segue. So the way you get at segues is there is a method that's part of UI view controller called prepare for segue. So we need to override it. You know in Objective-C, to override something, you just made the signature again. In Swift, you add the override function to say, I'm overriding a function that comes from my parent class. So override prepare for segue, and then in it, start doing the logic to say, okay, when is this guy going to fire? Where is my segue? You can have multiple, you'll probably, when you work on a storyboard, you'll have like a dozen segues. When you use the identifier, dot identifier, the string property that belongs to each one, when it fires, you can query that. So we named ours init player, right? So look for init player, and then do something. Just remember that. When it fires, do something. The segues fire after the storyboard has loaded. Who's done the hard way where they don't use storyboards or interface builder, or any of that fun stuff?
You're talking about where you just set up your own segues in code?
Yeah, well, you don't want to do that, but where you do everything in code.
Oh, not everything.
Right, what do you think? Will you ever do it again?
Probably.
I had so many. Did you do it before? What did you think?
Code a segue just by calling it perform segue with identifier.
Yep. Yeah. Well, no, I mean like where you initialize all the views in code.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of that without any.
That's the old way.
Right? Yeah, don't do that. It's not fun. But the way, it's important to say because you know you do a init, because when it loads up it does a init, or whatever the init subclass, the constructor subclass is, and then it does view did load, where it starts loading stuff up. It says I have a valid object, then it does view did appear. So when you go from a storyboard calls view did load, and then it calls prepare for segue. And these embed segues fire when that happens. So by doing this, we catch it. Okay, it fired. What do we want to do now? Now we want to actually give that object a home. So the way we connect the two together is through destination view controller. So there's a property on a segue called destination view controller, and that's a pointer to a UI view controller that's coming from your storyboard or somewhere else. So we're going to query that, and then we want to we're trying to find a view controller, right? That's an AV player controller, and we want to make sure everything lines up. We won't be able to do our fun stuff on like player.play if it's not a player class, right? So cast it. In Swift, you can cast with as, and then the class you're casting as. You'll also add like some more symbols here if it's an optional, like a question mark. And then that's how you say, get whatever's on here, make it an AV player controller, and then save it in Movie Player. But this is potentially unsafe. Swift is a very new language, so you have to be very careful with optionals. You know in Objective-C, when you access a null pointer and it's just null, Swift will sometimes crash and say, expected an optional but got null. So a way you can get around that is This is kind of an unofficial thing, is you do flet. So you try to declare this guy, you see if he exists, and then you see if you can cast him as this class. And then if he is, if the optional is valid and everything, then you say, okay, I have something valid, so I can do something with that. So this is the same way of doing that last code, where you get something out and cast it, except safer. And you want to know both methods because some of your classes will work directly, like this one works directly, and some of them will not. And you will be debugging it, and you'll be like, why is this thing crashing? It's nil. Oh, it's not nil, it's an optional. It's sometimes not even valid. So know how to do this. But that doesn't affect the next step. So optionals may not exist. Optionals, I think, are one of the hardest concepts in Swift. The syntax is pretty straightforward, and they make things easier. Like you don't have to do is equal to string. You just say equal equal. But like optionals are a complete different concept from C-based languages. So cool. All right, next step. We have our AVPlayerView controller, right? We need to start setting up our view and our model. So to do that, all right, we have to create an AVPlayerItem. AVPlayerItem contains the data. It's really easy, which is really cool. The way you initialize an AVPlayerItem is you call AVPlayerItem, and then the constructor is either URL or AVPlayer. So you can load up a file URL or a streaming URL that's valid, and it'll create all the fun stuff, make it an object, you can start using it. Or if you're using somebody else's AV player and you want to see what's currently playing, you do the opposite. You just say init with player and get whatever's in there. So to make that work, it's pretty easy for a streaming URL. Like you can play any MP4, any MP3. You just do NSURL with a string. So remember, URL and a string are different objects. You have to initialize a URL object with a string. So we do that. And it all works. And then when it loads up, it'll give you an error message. So that's a streaming URL. How do I do a file URL? A file URL is different. Because iOS is famous for not having like a system file path and a global thing like Android. That's why Android guys, stupid iOS, right? Android is the best. Sorry, Carl. They're both equally important, though. So to do a file URL, you need to get the file path. And so who's kind of played with the documents directory before, right? It's like the ugliest thing ever. Why don't they just say get documents directory? But the way it works is you call this constructor file URL with path instead of just string, and then you pass it like a relative path to a file that's on the system. Most of the time, almost always, the only folder you can access is the documents folder for your app. An app is like, if you've played with a Mac OS app, it's a .app as a folder that has other stuff in it. You can access the documents folder or other folders you make. So to do that, you find the system-generated path for your documents directory. You have to do this really weird constructor because it always changes. Every installation, it's different. So just do this garbage and then make it happen. Then turn it into a string because it's garbage, but you can cast it to a string object and it'll work. Then once you have that, okay, here's where my documents directory is. Just append the file name. Just append file.movie. We do what we did before. Make an URL object, initialize it with the URL. So now we have a player item. Now we have an object that represents our video. So how do we bring everything together for happiness and sunshine and puppies? We need to make an AV player. So remember how I said model view controller, the controller has a view inside of it? So what we're going to do at the end of the day is we're going to create a player view and tie it up to our view controller. So this is also really easy, deceptively easy. You just say AV, okay, typo. This was the last slide I did. You just say let player equals AV player with player item. And then there you go. So you take your player item, I'll change it right now so you don't get confused. Because even I'm confused. There you go. Yeah. I was agile. So you just, you have your player item, you created that object, and then you initialize an AV player object with that player item. And then there you have a player. And then how do you connect it? There's a player property on your AV player view controller. And you just say movie player dot player. That guy we retrieved from the storyboard, just set this guy equal to the one I just made. There you go. That's how you play video. Then it'll start doing stuff. So let me show you if the internet's working for me. All right. So this is the one that I created. I played on the simulator. I'll show you what else is on here. AVKit demo. So it has an embedded video player. You can do that. You can do that. See, it'll rotate because of the constraints. And then it'll play back and do scrubbing for you automatically. Just from like 3 or 4 lines of code. And this. You don't have to worry about anything anymore. But tell your boss it's still going to take like 4 weeks. Or whatever. So that's what you can do in 3 lines of code. Right? Or if you're your own boss, then tell yourself to stop slacking and learn something harder. So let me show you. I know we went pretty fast, but let me show you how I did it. So, okay, I have a simple project, right? It only has 3 files in it. This is what my single view controller gives me. Then first step, I click on the project file. I don't need to change any of this. I go to the bottom, I add my frameworks. So I add Kit, Foundation, good to go. Go to my storyboard. I hate this. Who else hates this? If you're not full screen, if you're not 100%, you can't mess with stuff on here. And I can delete it because I'm safe, or not. I'll just show you. So I'm going to create a controller, a container, right? So I'll just search for container and drag it on there. Stupid thing. You have to zoom in to 100% or it doesn't work. And then it does this weird stuff like this.
You're just trying to sell retina for kids.
I know. I'm not going to buy a heatsink with a processor glued on to a monitor that's glued onto a chip that controls the monitor. Okay, so you see how I said it would create some garbage view controller that I don't care about? Look at that. It's so ugly it doesn't even want to show it. So you have that. So just delete it. Just click on it and delete it. Bye. And then start dragging stuff down. So I'll click on this guy at 100% because it doesn't work if you're not at 100%. This is the greatest UX engineering in the world, my friends. The greatest in the world. So you control drag from this guy, and then you drop it on here, and it shows up. You say embed. Then, okay, it's connected. You name it. Before you forget it. Do you know how horrible it was to look up the names of these things too? By the way, there you go. You click on it in the middle tab. It says, that's where you can name it. So I'm going to call it a knit player. And if I typed it wrong, it's going to crash. And you know how the player view controller started out really big? It will actually, whatever you put in a segue in a container view will actually change size to kind of reflect what you did. So this thing sucks. I'm impatient. Let me make this guy smaller. Wow. The worst part of the demo. So I make it smaller, it's a little rectangle, then look, he's a rectangle too.
Yep.
Then I don't have to do anything else. But let me set constraints. So go to this guy, and I want to fix the width and the height. That's how you say, when the rubber band stretches, keep it the same size. And then say, I want him to be in the middle of the rubber band. So do those two. Then it's red. It's like, I'm confused, I'm lost. Press up, update frames, then there it'll go. So let me show you why auto sizing is cool, slash horrible. So by default, everything's a square. They call that any. You can drag on here and pick a ratio that looks like what device you're targeting, and it'll adapt your UI. So I want to make it work on iPhone 6, right? That's what it looked like on the 6. That's what it looked like on, yeah. That's what it looked like on a tiny phone. That's what it looked like in landscape. So everything should work, right? And then let's do the code part.
You know, another great feature of that is it allows you to put controls in a place
Yeah.
you think you put them and then
Yeah.
not be able to access them.
Yeah, so the way I like to think about it, think of it like object-oriented programming. That one class, any, is the parent class for everything.
Go to the document outline, you can see your constraints.
Yes, you can see that too. So you go down here, if it lets me click, and then you can see the hierarchy. This is super useful when you're debugging stuff. Like if you have a view on top of a view, but you can also see like where your constraints are. It's a good way of deleting them. But you're going to delete them a lot. Yeah. Okay, so you know the code part? So I import right here, just import. I initialize my object, I add it to the class right here, and then this is where I do the rest of the stuff. So find it, we'll actually break through. Find it, fire, and I'll show you the execution path. Or I'll look like a doofus, because we'll do the opposite of what I said. So when it finds it, start initializing it. So let's try to run. Oh, I was a dumbass. Sorry. It does an opposite. It creates the segues, and then it does view did load. So it found the segue for init player, and then we're going to start initializing stuff. And if you check this out, you can see when it's actually making things valid pointers. So there we go. Sender. What is this? Did it crash? No, it didn't.
Player item is nil.
Oh, is it player item nil? Let's find out. And then it won't load because we don't have internet, or it's not very consistent. But when it does load, it's cool. So that's how you make a video app. And you can do the same thing for music. Just give it a music URL. And if you don't want controls, give it MP player. And then last 3 slides, they're really easy. They're not hard.
Can you control the starting and starting time, or when it's
Yes, I was just about to say that. So here's some cool things you can do and why I like AVKit. If you want to build a playlist, instead of using AVPlayer, use AVQPlayer. Then you make multiple player item objects, and you just put them in a queue, and then it all works. You just literally change what that constructor is. You can do an overlay view, like you can put a watermark. With AVKit, you can't do it as easily in MP player controller, but you can add a watermark. There's a property on there that lets you add an overlay view. So if you want to draw like stupid faces on everybody who's in the video, or show your logo at the bottom, you can do that.
So you
And
put
then-
queues and Grand Central Dispatch?
No, not even. It's just, it's not an operation queue. It's just a queue of video items. You had a question, right?
Yeah, I just wondered if it's possible to use AV Player or AVQ Player with M3U8 playlists.
Yes, actually it works. If Safari accepts it, then it'll work. That's the easiest test. Just try to load your URL in Safari. Something you'll run into is Apple is very sensitive about everything. I think I'm probably on their bad list because I write about them. But I don't work for them, so I'm not one of their own people. But when you do a video stream, unless the video stream does live streaming with Apple HTTP live streaming, HLS, it won't work. So sometimes you'll do a stream and it won't have the metadata Apple needs and it just won't work. So the best way to test it is just try to load it up in Safari on the iOS and see if that works. And then the last question, which is you can actually do autoplay and auto vents. Show an error message if it failed to load, or when it starts loading successfully, start doing this with key value observers. Who's used those before? They're like one of the most weird, hard, conceptual concepts to figure out. Who's used notifications? So a key value observer is like a notification, except it works on one object or a class of objects. And the way it works is you say, pick a key, like a variable, and pick a value, a property, and then say do something when it changes or when it hits a value. So kind of like a watch point for low-level debugging. But if you watch status, they don't actually give you an error happened. You have to watch status. And when you watch status, you can see, did the video load correctly? Did it fail to play? So what I'll do a lot in my apps is I'll say, when the status is changed to ready to play, start playing the video automatically. Or when it's shown an error, show an alert. There you go. Lots of fun stuff. More is in the book. And you'll also learn how to hook into the events, because I show you how to build your own player, from the ground up, just from AVPlayerLayer and add the controls. So the announcements and that junk. Some more info. The app is beginning iOS media app development. Just go to beginningiosmediaapps.com. It's everywhere, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kindle, blah, 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 blah. It's everywhere. Find it at the cheapest price, because I don't think it affects how much I get paid. Jeff is amazing, though. Jeff bought it from A-Press. He bought the amazing thing. And then that's the book. You can also special order it at Barnes & Noble. It's not in all the stores yet, but you can just go there and order it. I'll also have copies, which I'm selling cheaper than Amazon. My site, DevAtelier, freelancing, consulting stuff. You can talk to me or Steven. Steven knows my schedule better than me now. So he's the gatekeeper. And then they email me, just email info@DevAtelier. This way, if I forget, he can get it. And then I'm talking a lot of stuff. Steven makes sure of that. I'm singling you out. I have to buy you dinner or something, whatever. I usually feed my helpers. You don't want them to die of starvation. So we're talking, who goes to SoCal Code Camp? It's like a free user group event. It's more LA, Orange County, but I'm giving 3 talks. Yes, in June, right? I'm probably going to talk at that too.
I'm user of the extension liaison.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, so we have one coming up in March at Cal State Fullerton. It's mostly like .NET people, but you can get some good like REST API stuff, and there's a dude giving like some Apple talks. So that's the weekend of the 6th. Who's going to March Mingle? Yeah. Julie knows everything. It's like, it's a big user group, tech user group thing for San Diego. It's like a mixer. I don't know if there's I don't think it's an open bar, but you can buy drinks and socialize with everyone. That's cool. I'm going to be signing books there. I'm going to CocoaConf Yosemite, in Yosemite. So if you're there, come find me. I think most of it is going to be me giving my publisher a hard time for stuff. But if you're there, I'll be there. And then I'm going to start doing Google Hangouts. I don't know if people are interested in that. Who's interested? Where I'm just going to answer questions for an hour, like an AMA. So I'll probably send details to Jeff. We're going to do that kind of on a regular basis to promote the book. So if you have questions about making an app or my book, just come bug me for an hour. He'll make sure of that. So that's it. That's the talk. I'll answer questions, and then after that, I'll sign books and whatever, and we'll raffle off a copy of the book. So questions?
Do you always recommend building with the iOS 8 SDK and targeting iOS 7?
So iOS 8, depending on who you talk to, is either between 60 to 80%. If you cover you shouldn't kill yourself to cover like iOS 5, but try to cover the last version, because that's what most people who don't want to upgrade are on. So always try to make it work on both. And it's not an unreasonable test case, right? Just have another device that you never upgraded.
And if you target iOS 7, though, that's going to capture it. That's really 68%.
That you'll actually get closer to like 90, 100, like 90, 95%. If you have 7.
Devices that can possibly take that.
Right?
They never put that asterisk very big on their client.
All the entire App Store is just numbers that people make up. You can't trust them. Same thing for publishing. I don't know anything. I don't know how many copies I've sold. I just know sometimes I'm like number 15, and sometimes I'm like nobody. But cool, more questions.
What are some of the limits of the media that you can handle? For example, can you do 4K or?
Apple, yes and no. The camera, depending on what device you're on, it can record 4K. But you may get into memory issues where it might not be able to play it back, or you'll need to be very safe when you play it that you're not killing all your memory. Because all video players are a buffer. It buffers up frames until it can load stuff. If you're not careful, if you're not doing like the pointers and like a weak pointer, strong pointer, all that stuff correctly, you could run out of memory before it loads up your entire video. For most videos, you'll be okay. Most people, when they do mobile, you transcode it, you encode it at different formats, and usually the mobile one is like 720, 1080p. Because they say it's like 2,500 pixels, but virtually it's like 1,000. So don't kill yourself, for 4K.
Is AirPlay included for free? You use the
Yes, it is. Yeah, the button shows up. The cool thing about Media Player controller is it's headless. So if you want to disable AirPlay, that's where you make your own control. Or if you follow the book in subclass AVPlayer, you can hide it.
Okay.
If you use if you go below, like AVPlayer or Media Player, you can hide it. Otherwise, you get it. Yes?
If you're making an app where you're like generating audio instead of just playing a file, like maybe like a metronome or something like that, is AV Player still a good road to go down? Or do
You can use it to play back. I wouldn't, because by default it'll try to give you a view. That's where I'd use the media player. But you're going to use, I don't remember what the audio recorder class is. It's in the book somewhere. But there's an audio recorder class, which is a headless recorder. And you'll use that to record, then you'll use a headless player to play back your audio. Yes?
Does the AV Player include the app extensions, other than AirPlay?
Like when you're doing your own app extension that appears on something else?
Yeah, or can you share it? Like,
I know you can record audio from an extension. I don't know about the playback. I wouldn't bet on it because UX-wise, you really shouldn't have an extension do more than one or two simple tasks, right? It's not really it's not really creation. It's supposed to be consumption.
well, like save or email or share or something?
You can, when you do an extension, it works as like a, gosh, what's that word? There's a delegate method that fires. So you'll have a couple of seconds to do some code that gets hit off in the background. So you can save, but I'd kind of be careful because you might get into a point where even though Apple says they do multi-threading and background processing, it's only for a couple of things like downloading a file or checking GPS. You might not have enough time to finish your request. So be careful. Use a operation queue to queue stuff up. Cool. More questions? Yes?
Annoying thing I never got to in my music player is resuming after an interruption, like a phone call.
Ah, okay. I have a wonderful book that you have to, there's something called,
You the man.
I literally wrote down everything people asked me for, and I made it a book.
I'm your new best friend.
There you go. It's on sale, cheaper than whatever, no, right? But there's a special delegate. You call a protocol that lets you handle the session interruptions. So there's an interruption for a phone call. There's an interruption for a headphone jack. It's in here.
Headphone jack I did do.
Yeah. My example was I made a shoutcast player because I missed it. And then whenever I'd unplug it, the sound wouldn't turn off and everyone would hear my embarrassing music.
Well, see, and that's exactly my use case is in the car because I don't have a new car. I have to use a cable instead of Bluetooth. So
it's one of these chapters.
I got that use case working.
I think it's chapter 6. Advanced audio interfaces, yeah. There's a snippet in there. Fun stuff. Beautiful. More questions. It took too long to write this, and I lost track of time. I'm still catching up for sleep. You had a question?
Yeah. How good is AVKit or AVPlayer for like doing like streaming audio, streaming video?
It's really good. I haven't had trouble with it. Just the difference is if you want headless or an interface. They're pretty good. The issue you'll run into 90% of the time. Okay, so one other thing about MP Player, one other reason I don't like it is it's very sensitive. Like you have to configure it specifically for streaming or video or file playback or AV asset playback. But once you get that set up and once you make sure your streaming protocol is good, you're solid. I've never had trouble. I built like a Dropbox app for a hardware device, but it wasn't doing HLS, so I could do everything except stream audio or stream video. Yeah. More questions? Yes. You use Core Media, and then Core Media sits below VFoundation. That does the video buffering, and then you can make, it's in the book too. You can make a class that observes, they have a protocol, so you can actually make your custom class respond to the MP Player delegate methods. You can implement your own thing for that protocol. So, more questions? You guys are a good audience. You laughed at most of my jokes. The only thing my editor did, I love my editor, by the way, Russell and Kevin and Michelle, my editors. The only thing they made me cut out where I had to change we to you, and I had to get rid of my bad jokes. And they're like, this joke has no purpose here. And I'm like, that's my joke. So good. Fun. More questions. I'm here, and I'm at dinner. Good. Fun.